So hello everyone, welcome to this very improvised panel. So we decided just some days ago that it would be important to talk about post-Paris journalism. And I introduce our speakers again because it's important to know a little bit about their background. So Bruno Patino just flew in from Paris. He's the director of programs and digital at France Télévisions. So at the end, he's one of the most influential French journalists. Because he's also director of the journalism school of Sciences Po, one of the grandes écoles in France. You know Jeff already, the CUNY media professor, Google Versteher, and journalist, and Ullrich Reitz just became chief editor of Focus 4 months ago. And so we will talk about what will happen with journalism after Paris. And my first question goes to you. Where did you hear from this really terrible news?
Well, I think this time everybody heard the news through the alerts that came by the phone.
On your phone?
Yes, on the phone. It is known that the President of the Republic in France, François Hollande, learned the news through a text given by a friend that said, you should come here, everybody's dead. So I think even the channels and journalists hear the news through the networks, the social networks, Twitter, the alerts, the text, and this is it. And so, you know, it's difficult to talk about it just seven to 10 days after. Le Monde's headline yesterday was "The 7 days that changed France." I'm not sure it's not too soon to say that. It is sure that the demonstration that took place last Sunday was the biggest demonstration in the history of France. So it was a moment of history, but it's too soon to say that this moment will change the history of France. One of the professors said, it's like a big bang. For the time you have an emotional shock, everything is gathered, and now the different forces will separate one from another, and we will be able to distinguish what is at stake here, the political problems, the social problems, the model of the Republic, the educational system, the suburbs problems, and of course the geopolitical problem. But as far as journalism is concerned, I guess it's a little bit the same. We still are under the emotional shock. And of course this emotional shock produces three things that goes into one direction, and the direction is unanimity. And so unanimity because of the feeling. It's a shock and a symbol to know that people enter the newsroom. To my knowledge, it's the first time in history that people enter with guns in the newsroom and shoot and kill everybody. So of course this shock produces unanimity. We lost friends, personal acquaintances. Then you have to do your job to cover the stories. And then you have also to have a professional position that says the laws, and the law, nothing but the law. The law allows you to publish those drawings. The law allows you to publish stories. And if people, terrorists, try to prevent you from publishing those stories, you have to publish them. No question asked. You have to publish them. But then, when the time comes, we will realize, as journalists, three things. First, the things that we knew, but we didn't measure. The second, the things we didn't really realize. And the third thing is the thing we have to question now. The thing we knew but we really didn't measure, let me give you two examples. One will be strange for you, I guess, but we measure that the printed press, it's difficult for the printed press now to reach everybody. the difficulties that Charlie had to print 1 and then 3 and then 7 million copies, the difficulty of the press system to distribute those copies, show that now, for the printed press to reach 100% of the population, it's not as easy as it used to be. And people were taking pictures of people lining before newsstands because it was so new. It used to be the case 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But now people were looking for newsstands because a lot of newsstands have closed in France, and they were queuing in front of newsstands. So one thing we really knew but we didn't measure is that it's not as easy as it used to be for the printed press to reach everybody now. The second thing, of course, is the weight of social networks in producing and broadcasting news. I told you the way we learned the news. I should tell you that some of the terrorists had GoPros with them. Of course, the shooting, the videos of the killings, a lot of them came to Facebook before they reached the traditional media. And they were broadcasted in the whole world before they reached the media. And it was the first, we knew that, but it was so massive this time that really it had a huge impact on us. But then came the thing we really didn't realize. And one thing we didn't realize is the social networks as a majority echo chamber. Let me give you an example. I was in a digital newsroom when September 11 happened. And it changed digital journalism forever because it gave us continuous time, continuous news breaking. I was in the digital newsroom when the London and Madrid attack happened, and it changed digital journalism because we had to take into account the pictures, the videos, the messages coming from the audience. But this time, this is the work in traditional newsroom that changed. It's the first time we did 40, 50, 60 hours of live coverage of the event at France Télévisions. And it is the first time that I witnessed the traditional newsroom not only taking into account what came through Twitter, Facebook, but responding to them on air, not on the digital websites or the apps, on air. They were taking into account pictures being shown, videos being shown on social networks, and answering to them, showing to them. And for me, it's the first time that the audience really broke through traditional newsroom, traditional live coverages. It's what somebody called augmented real-time coverage, but it is true. This changed something. And last, these things shows us that we will have to question something in this new way of doing journalism. This is the question of responsibility. Of course, in France, it's too soon to ask this question of responsibility. But we know that as journalists, we don't always show everything. And I'm not speaking about the drawings here. I'm speaking about the videos of people being killed. We haven't shown those videos for a long time. We have decided not to show them. But they were on Facebook, all over Facebook. So how do you exert your responsibility when you don't show to your audience images that your audience already knows? So this is a change of paradigm in the responsibility of journalism. Not only what do you decide you will talk about, but what do you decide not to talk about? And last thing, let me just finish there. The last thing we really didn't realize for the first time is that now, when we produce content, we don't rule about the context where it is published. So we are developing the out-of-context journalism that is changing a lot of things in a way people receive the messages we produce. So if you ask me, just in a nutshell, I'm not sure France has really changed last week, but the way we are doing journalism has changed last week, I'm sure.
So my question for you as the media professor would be, a philosophical question. So do you think media will be defined by what they are not doing? So in contrast to what the net is doing and social media?
You, my friend, wrote a very good piece in Zeit Online about your newsroom, and the Zeit newsroom is on the street in Berlin, in Potsdamer Place, with glass all around. And that image itself tells you everything you need to know about where we are with journalism now. I have been arguing that journalism must change, as I said before, must change its idea of thinking that it is a content producer to realizing that journalism is a service. It serves people, it helps them meet their goals. You cannot do that unless you know people and know their goals. You cannot do that unless you are in their communities and part of them. So just at the time when the internet enables us to know people as individuals, not as a mass, to be involved with them, now we perhaps will be frightened to do that. We're forced into a position of fright. And it's not just Charlie Hebdo, it's of course, 2014 was a year of horrendous danger mortal danger for journalists, and not just journalists. Let's remember a blogger being caned in Saudi Arabia for free speech. So my fear is twofold. One, that we journalists might have the reflex to go back into shells and away from the communities, and that this would do that to us. I would hope not. I hope we'd be courageous. But speaking of courage, now if I'm going to apologize from America one more time, I was impressed that all across Europe, publishers stood in solidarity with Charlie Hebdo, including At Risk and At Threat, and published the cartoons that brought this, this was supposedly about, though I don't think it was really about this, but they did that which was daring. We in America did not. And it did become about what we don't publish. It did become about a sense of political correctness gone to an extreme. What is at threat here in the end in journalism is free speech, full stop. And that's what we have to be concerned about. Free speech, when the incident happened, I wrote that I saw people saying, well, you're American, you're your First Amendment, you guys are crazy about this. But free speech is not some American privilege, it is a human right. And beyond that, free speech is not just an American privilege, it is a journalistic responsibility. If we do not exercise these muscles of free speech, we will lose them. We will lose them to those who would try to rob them from us. So I'm worried about the reaction already, especially in American journalism, to the Charlie Hebdo massacre. And I don't know where it's going to, I agree, we don't know whether countries are changed. I was at the World Trade Center on 9/11. We had no Twitter then. I didn't have a camera with me then on my telephone. The world saw that from 3 miles away on rooftops with smoke going up. I saw an entirely different world. My wife remains angry with me to this day because I stayed there because I'm a journalist. And journalism, what it could do that day, has changed immensely. But society is changing. Society is struggling over things. What is journalism's role in that? That's the real question. I agree.
May I react to what Jeff said? I'm a little bit old-fashioned. And I think our job is description more than demonstration. We, with Focus News magazine, we printed some of these caricatures of Charlie Hebdo. But Bruno before said a wonderful word. France was under shock, but on the other hand, Bruno said, and then we went back to our offices and did our job. And the job is, yes, of course, inner solidarity, but on the other hand, we rely on a distance view on the things. And therefore I understood that American media like New York Times chose not to publish Charlie Hebdo's cartoons because they come from a completely different tradition. And I understood it.
But you did publish.
I published.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think that part of the question...
You got really angry about the New York Times not publishing anything.
Not really angry, just a little miffed.
Yeah, read your blog post, man. So you got really, really angry at the U.S.
You haven't seen angry, fella.
So can you, why is that so in the home country of free speech? Why?
Explain myself. I don't know. I don't fully understand it. I think that the problem is, and I was having a discussion with one of my friends in the audience before, I think that we're reaching a world where the standard, what we do and don't do, if that standard is offense, we lose. Because anything can offend someone. And if we become a society where we dare not offend, we dare not debate, we dare not do the controversial, then we've lost free speech, right there. Now, having said that, of course, there's also a whole raft of idiocy that's happening, especially on American cable TV. I won't mention the network, you know what it is. That's declaring Paris is lost to the Muslim extremists, according to Fox. There, I said it. And so I'm not suggesting we open the floodgates to idiocy, but I think there's a right to know and a right to see. I think we have to, in the end, trust and respect the public that they can make their own judgments, and we are not here to be their nanny.
What does "Je suis Charlie" mean to French journalists?
Well, you know, of course, there were our colleagues. And what Jeff said, it is true. I mean, let's put it that way. You can agree or disagree when Charlie publishes drawings, caricatures in that way. But the moment people threat Charlie in order not to have those caricatures published, you have to publish them. Because the context has changed. Because when somebody is trying to threat your freedom of expression, then you have to stand for this freedom of expression. This is as simple as that. So we have shown the caricatures on the TV broadcast, no question asked. And of course we received threats, threatening tweets, whatever. We knew that. But we have to do that, because this is not sharing Charlie Hebdo idea. Je suis Charlie does not mean I fully agree with Charlie Hebdo. Je suis Charlie means it's very important to be able to publish Charlie Hebdo in France. This is not the same thing. And so Je suis Charlie, it is not only the journalist. I mean, there were 3.7 million people in the street last Sunday. It's the biggest demonstration in France history. I told you, the second one when we buried Victor Hugo in the 19th century, 2.5 million people in the street. So those people were not the readers of Charlie Hebdo. Charlie Hebdo is 30,000 people reading it. So the huge majority of the people had never seen Charlie Hebdo. Charlie Hebdo, in its form, was a very 19th century newspaper. But those people were demonstrating in the street because it's very important that all the Charlie Hebdo of the earth can exist and can publish what they say. And so Je suis Charlie means I'm in favor of freedom of the speech, of a society where killing is not the answer. I mean, there is a freedom of speech, not a freedom of killing. This is as simple as that. But now, I mean, the phenomenon was bigger than Charlie Hebdo. I told you, it's very important to know that in France, we had 3 attacks. Journalists in Charlie Hebdo were killed. A French policewoman was killed on the street, just like that, so a representative of the state. And people in a cashier supermarket, Jewish people in a cashier supermarket. So we had 3 attacks in 3 different days. And the people in the streets demonstrating with Je suis Charlie were mourning the three victims of the 3 attacks because they were mourning a way we live together.
So this was a huge shock for journalists, and one of my fears is that we basically freak out so that we see this terror and kind of overreact. I don't know if you understand, but so, and just hours after the attacks, at least in Germany, the political parties try to, so one of the more interesting political parties try to use this case to push their agenda. And also Rupert Murdoch wrote a quite interesting tweet, right? So I read that. So Murdoch tweeted, maybe most Muslims peaceful, so it's Twitter, maybe most Muslims peaceful, but until they recognize and destroy their growing jihadist cancer, they must be held responsible. So this was my fear, and
it's not American, not really. Don't look at me.
I know. But so you mentioned responsibility. So how can we deal with these things in a responsible way?
Openly, without taboos. We talked before we were here on stage on the Focus cover, Focus News magazine cover.
You have this cover. So it was published yesterday, I think.
It was published yesterday.
Actually, so to explain that, I have a shitstorm in my timeline at Twitter about this cover, and it's hard to translate. It says something like this. So the headline is, "This has nothing to do with Islam." Yes, it has, and you see a Kalashnikov. So you have this big Kalashnikov and a connection to Islam.
Yeah, it is clear where it comes from. Before the attacks in Paris, we had a great debate in Germany about that Islamic topic. And we have parallel societies in Berlin, for example, or in the cities of the so-called Ruhrgebiet. We have a problem with the Salafists. We have 1,000 terrorist-minded people living in Germany, so we have a problem. And I think 3 days ago, our second man in state, who is called Lammert, this is the head of the parliament, he said, well, to say this sentence, the Paris attacks, has nothing to do with Islam, is the same as saying the Crusaders, the medieval Crusaders, had nothing to do with Christ's religion. So it's one of the great debates we will face in the next weeks and months about the question, what is Islam, what is Islamism, what is terrorism, and what is all behind that. And me, as a liberal thinking European, that is how I feel about myself. We have open societies. And when we want to integrate all the Muslims, not only the peaceful ones, but all the Muslims, then the Islamic faith has to change itself. For example, change the attitude towards the Quran. If you take the Quran word by word, this is from the year 700, and it was written to 1/3 when Muhammad was in war. And then you find enough parts of Quran enabling terrorists to be on war. And we have to discuss about the things as liberal-minded people, And that is what the Focus cover story is about.
Yeah. I'm totally fine with the question, what and is there, and what is the connection between a religion and extremism? That's fair enough to ask.
You don't like the Kalashnikov?
I freaked out, basically, when I saw the cover in the supermarket, because this was my fear, that we kind of overreact. And I think I wouldn't show a Kalashnikov in connection with a whole religion. For me, that says...
But on the other hand, this opinion I understand, and you get applause for it because it's politically correct. On the other hand, the Kalashnikov makes clear what the problem really is. It is a gray zone between Islamistic and terrorism. And the Kalashnikov is a symbol for that. And as a magazine, you can use such iconic methods to make clear what really is on stage here.
So, as big media outlets, do we always have to concentrate on the majority of our readers? Or isn't it important to take into account our Muslim readers, our Jewish readers, whatever, you know.
Talk to Muslims.
Yeah.
We talk to Muslims in the magazine, and we will do in the next weeks.
So, is it okay in such a situation to insult just everyone in the community? Is that wise? Should we do that? Is it responsible? Maybe that's the question I'm asking myself.
To insult for the sake of insulting, no, but insulting or ridiculing is part of speech in some cases. So let me just say two things here. One is Bill Maher is a comic in the US. He's made a movie which he calls every religion a lie. He doesn't like it. He ridicules religions. Does he have a right to say that? Absolutely he does. Should it be quoted? Yes. If it offends someone, do we still quote it? Yes. Is it newsworthy because he's famous? Yes. But there's a bigger question which you're alluding to, which I think is a bigger societal question, and it goes back to the Gutenberg panel. I think we're moving toward the death of the mass, and we work in the business of masses. We treat everyone the same, because that's what the technology required us to do. We print the same thing for everybody. I think what we're seeing, you have 40 independence movements in Europe alone. As you have the EU on the one hand, you also have independence where people are trying to find new identities as communities. Within nations, you have communities that care about Islamic law and Jewish law and Christian law and civil law. One way or the other, we have to fucking figure out how to live together. That's the lesson of the last few weeks. So we can't do that by tiptoeing away from controversy. Neither can we do that by insulting people for the sake of insulting them without a point. And Charlie Hebdo had a point in what it was doing. Bill Maher has points in what he's doing. We have to recognize that too. We can't just say that something is taboo. And no, you can't say that. Now in the US, we have good reason not to use what we now call the N-word, though we refer to that all the time. I fully support that. We shouldn't do that. Unless a politician were quoted as saying it, would we put the video of that up? I don't know. There are reasons for anything and everything. But one way or the other, I think we have to rethink of our mass publications as publications and services and shows that serve collections of communities. And in doing so, our job as journalists is to expose communities to each other. We have to do a better job of reporting on and from Muslim communities to Christian communities to atheist communities to whatever Jewish communities, so we can try to foster understanding among them. I think that's our higher journalistic responsibility.
So let's talk about trust when it comes to media, which is also an important topic in this area. So in Germany, the word of the year is Lügenpresse, so the liars press or whatever. And there's a kind of movement, even the New York Times discovered patriotische Europäer gegen die Islamisierung des Abendlandes, which means patriotic Europeans against Islamization and, well, the Christian West or the Occident or whatever. And they basically, so the founders of this movement basically do not talk to the press because they tell us, you are liars, you always write what you want, you never listen to what concerns us. It feels like another minority which is ignored, and we have growing and growing demonstrations in this area. How could that happen?
It is, first of all, where does it happen? It happens in one city, more or less, that is Dresden. 25,000 people are on the streets there. They tried to start it in Western states. They tried to start it in Western cities like Cologne, Düsseldorf, and so on. And there were only 200, 300, 400 people of that kind of thinking, which is more or less very right-wing, were on the streets, and the anti-demonstrators were 10th the time more people. So if you talk about a movement, I think you have first to describe that it is only taking part in one city, Dresden. That doesn't make it better, but on the other hand, it helps to understand what's going on, because in Dresden, there are only living very, very, very few people of Islamic faith. What they do when they call it Lügenpresse, the liar's press, is that they think that the political and economical elites ignore the problems they have with integration and refugees. There is a declining, the inhabitants of many cities in Eastern Germany decline very, very rapidly. 90% of the people in Eastern Germany don't have their old jobs anymore. They lost their jobs after 1989. That makes that you have to understand that to see that they don't trust politics anymore. When politics say, well, you don't, in your cities, you don't face any problems anymore. And I think I try to understand what's going on there, because it's not a German phenomenon, it's only a phenomenon of one city and not more.
Yeah, but so there's a bigger phenomenon. People around the world do not trust us anymore. They don't even want to talk to us anymore.
I think the question of trust is, as far as I'm concerned, the biggest challenge of journalism today. I'm not very aware of what Ullrich described, but we know that the question of trust is the main question for our job. People used to trust us because they had no choice. The free market of ideas, like my friends Americans say, was controlled by the media and journalism. Now today, everybody enters the free market of ideas. And we don't have to take trust for granted. We have to fight for the trust of the people. We have to be accountable about what we publish, about the way we published it, about the way we put the headlines, about the way we respond to people. The real-time journalism we're doing today, it's not the continuous time journalism we did before. Real-time is also a possibility to interact with the audience, to answer the audience question. When they say, I'm not sure, why did you publish that? We answer that. Of course, when we live an event today, everybody that's living an event is answering to the audience question. You mentioned that I run a school, we teach to the people, we teach to the students, I'm confident Jeff also, that trust is the main objective today. Not only the reality of the fact, but the way that you do your job, you account your job, you answer, you interact with the audience has to produce trust, because at the end of the day, this is the force that will differentiate us from the rest of the messages that are here. So I feel that the trust about journalism is questioned all over the world, but it's our challenge. And it's the way we have to do our job today is to show that we are trying day to day, message by message, not with a massive audience, but with each member of the audience to develop that trust.
So how do we do that? So both of you are teachers when it comes to journalism teachers. And so I have the feeling that all the handbook rules do not work anymore. You know, you have to be transparent. We are transparent. It doesn't work. So we have all these comments of people telling us that we just invent stuff, all these conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So have we lost the fight for trust, whatever?
I think we had less than we ever thought we had. If you look at the numbers in the US on trust, it was declining rapidly in the 70s. It has nothing to do with the internet. The internet only increased it. You have the ability for people to come out and speak on their own, but I think the problem remains, it's great hubris to believe that we ever could have been owners of trust. You have to earn it every time. You have to. It's a bank that you put deposits in, and we have to figure out how to regain that. One more plug for our degree in social journalism at CUNY. The first and most important courses there are in listening. Understanding who a community is, what ties them together, what are their needs. Go and listen to the community. The highest form of journalistic interactivity is not comments. Comments are insulting. Comments say, after we're done with our work, we will allow you to comment on it, but by the way, we're in the bar and we don't give a shit what you have to say. The highest form of journalistic interactivity is collaboration. It's collaboration with the community to truly work together for the community's goals, not our goals. That's a very different view of journalism than we have had since 150 years after Gutenberg.
But on the other hand, can I put one figure in? I worked for 20 years in the newspaper business before I changed to a news magazine. What we know is that 80% of the people in Germany, 80%, trust the newspapers. Trust the newspapers like they trust the so-called öffentlich-rechtliche TV. That means the public TV, 80%, and that's a high rate. Don't make the mistake and take what Pegida says, this movement in Dresden, for granted. Most of the people trust our media.
By the way, if I'm sure we are able to take questions. So if you have questions, you should raise your hand now. And Jeff, my beautiful assistant, will pass on the mic.
Thank you, Jeff, for the microphone, and also for commenting the way you did about the New York Times not publishing the cartoons, and you refer to them as actually kind of being the epitome of journalism. But there are actually two organizations who published the cartoon in the U.S. post the attack, and it was BuzzFeed, and it was the Huffington Post, which we will probably call new media. When Steffi introduced the panel, she said, well, what is the role of digital in this new accountability and accountable journalism, which you talked about? And so I wanted to ask you and Bruno actually the question about, what do you think new media has to play, in this new role and, in this new enlightenment for everybody, including Muslims?
Yeah. So, Jeff, can you repeat the question?
The question is the role of new media. We talked about in the U.S. two places, BuzzFeed and Huffington Post did run the cartoons while the New York Times did not. What's the role of new media? How different is it?
Bruno?
Well, first of all, I have now a problem in the distinction between legacy media and new media, because things are changing. But let's say that the digital newsroom have been developing the contact with the audience for a long time now. So they know that whenever they publish something, just 10% of the job is done. And then the dialogue, the interaction with the audience is an incredible part of the audience, is the incredible part of the job. Then they also face the whole content that is online, and that sometimes they decide to mention without publishing, then sometimes to link to them. So I think that in newsroom, the digital newsroom really can give the other journalists a taste of the dialogue, cooperation, collaboration with the audience. I think this is the peculiar role. For the rest of it, I mentioned to you before, this time it seemed to me that although TV was as always the major media as far as numbers are concerned, the pace, the stories, the tone, the angles were coming from the digital world.
Okay, so are there other questions?
So if 80% of the people are trusting media, how do you explain that the vast majority of people who are commenting online are telling it's liar's press and Pegida's right and all that? How do you explain yourself that?
They are organized by Putin.
Are they?
I'm just the moderator, so...
Well, I would go back, what I said before is, I don't think we can take comment. I defended comments for a lot of years, but I think the architecture of comments is inherently insulting to the public, A. B, when we don't police those communities, the schmucks and trolls come in and take them over, and the civilized people leave, and they become worthless. And C, we don't respect the public enough by collaborating. So I wouldn't use comments alone as the judgment of the vox populi. Now, that doesn't mean there's not worth in them, but I think we've got to do a far better job of having a better and truer dialogue with the public earlier in the process of journalism.
You want to comment on that? No? Other questions?
Arguments.
Arguments over here. And, okay, so one last question.
Thank you. It's a very short comment. You were talking about trust a lot and about empathy and so on. I just want to draw your attention to a beautiful book which just appeared, How to Improve Your Life with Adam Smith. And the book is about Adam Smith's book from 1756 on moral sentiments, where the two buzzwords are basically trust and empathy. So it's not very new.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter Jungen.
So,
okay, let's do. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
This was an interesting, very good panel.